Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the third and final ReDem Quality Day of 2025. It's truly great looking at the participant list to see so many familiar names back with us, and just as exciting to welcome also a couple of new ones. For the new joiners among you, I'm Julia Mittermeier, CEO at ReDem, and I have the pleasure of guiding you through this year's Quality Days. We began this year's series by looking at what the latest research reveals about survey fraud. And then last week, we heard two inspiring talks filled with real life experiences and practical solutions from the field. And today, we are wrapping things up with a powerful closing, starting with a keynote from Debrah Harding, followed by a panel discussion on a topic that's sparking a lot of conversation: AI in market research, blessing, curse, or wake-up call. For the panel, we're excited to welcome a few more fantastic voices to the virtual stage, and I'm really looking forward to an open and thought-provoking conversation. But first, let's kick things off with our first speaker. Please join me in welcoming Debrah Harding. She's Managing Director at the Market Research Society, one of Europe's most active and respected insights associations, and we've had the pleasure of working with Debrah on several initiatives. She has become, I think, one of the go-to voices in our industry when it comes to data quality and always pushing for more transparency and also trust. Debrah, I'm really looking forward to your presentation and to hearing the latest findings from the MRS and the Global Data Quality Initiative. Your session will run for around 20 minutes. Followed by a 10 minutes Q&A. To everyone in the audience, feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A tab below. You're also welcome to post them anonymously. I'll read them out after the presentation. And now, Debrah, over to you.
Thank you, Julia. I'm very much looking forward to this presentation. What I'm going to cover today is I'm going to just introduce the Global Data Quality Initiative for those of you that have either not heard of it or may have only heard about some bits of it, highlight some of the recent research findings and data quality metrics to show how we're doing and the progress we're making, and then also to share some of the tools that have been developed as part of the GDQ. So let's kick off. I mean, what is the mission of GDQ? Well, it's about we are a collaborative profession, and we need to build confidence in the data we collect and deliver through data quality guidance and standards that enhance the value of research. That's what the GDQ is all about. It's about building that confidence to enhance the value of research. And how are we doing that? Well, this is not a journey that anyone can take on their own. And on the screen here, you can see all of the association collaborators, which we're all working together to deliver that ambitious target of enhancing the value of research through better data quality. And these are associations that are some domestic associations like the VMO from Austria, the UK MRS, CRIC in Canada, plus global associations like SMR, Intellis Worldwide, and the Global Research Business Network. So the GDQ journey, it has been a very intense 2 years of this project so far. We started off very much with discussion and exploration of the data quality issues. Then we talked about the development and adoption of tools and benchmarks, and then the development and adoption of standards, and then the impact, measuring the impact of that and the changes that have been wrought as a result. The important thing to recognize is that this is not a linear journey. Whilst we are certainly had a lot of discussion and exploration, and we've developed some tools, we've also developed some metrics, we are developing new tools, we are still having further discussions, because this is about continuous improvement, because the GDQ journey is not a journey with an end, because as technology evolves, as AI becomes more ubiquitous within the research process, the data quality challenges that we will face will change, and we need to be continually improving, reflecting, and evolving what we do and how we do it in order to make sure that we keep pace with that data quality journey. But the current environment is not necessarily a great environment. There is still a lot of concern about quality. There is a lot of concern about the ecosystem and how complicated it is. But there's also quite a lot of inconsistent messaging and alarmist language. I've heard people say, I'm losing 40%, 50% of my sample through fraud, those kinds of things. But also it's a kind of understanding. We need to understand a little bit more rather than sort of framing things in such a way. We need to actually unpick some of that messaging and really get to grips with what is actually happening so that we can have real quality buying signals in the marketplace to make it easier for both those supplying samples and those buying samples to understand what they're providing and what they're buying. And there's also been a little bit of a kind of a competition over clarity in terms of there's a lot of noise in the marketplace, a lot of comments being made, and as I say, alarmist language being used, but there was insufficient clarity and transparency about what all of that really means. And so we've kind of not really been having a data-driven discussion. It's been an alarmist discussion and a challenging discussion, but not one that's been rooted in clear facts and understanding. So it has become to a large extent a blame game. This is a lot of the time I hear comments from clients saying, "Well, this is a supplier issue," and suppliers saying, "Well, this is a sample provider issue." But then equally, others saying, "No, actually, unless we solve the entire supply chain and look at data quality across the supply chain, then we're not ever going to make this situation any better." So, what do we need to do? Well, we need to be thinking in terms of a total quality framework. And that is really sort of two main parts. How we talk about data quality, the language we use, the things we measure, the things we share, and the data itself. So, what's going on with the data itself? With the participant fraud, participant engagement, the participant experience. In order to be really able to address this issue, we have to look across this spectrum and make sure we're doing improvements across the board in order to be able to actually move forward. But also we have to recognize the spectrum of fraud. There is a huge difference about what is going on out there. From, if you like, participants who kind of perceive research as a side hustle, a way to earn some extra cash, and are being persuaded by some of these, YouTube videos that are made that it's absolutely fine to do this. It's a perfectly good way to help you with cost of living, to earn a bit of extra cash, and it doesn't matter what you do. The fact that you might pretend to be a doctor when you're actually a plumber, it doesn't matter. And the fact that you might use certain illegal techniques to get around survey links and so on, doesn't matter. That's one end of the problem. To the other end of the problem, which is organized crime, using things like click farms and sort of large scale fraud activities to generate income using things like incentives and CPI payments to fund other illegal activities. And there are indications of things like drugs, guns, all the worst crimes of humanity also being funded potentially through some of the illegal activities that are being undertaken under the banner of research fraud. Now, that is a huge spectrum of activity, and that also requires really different kind of solutions. So it is also important to kind of keep in mind which problems are the ones that we could solve against that spectrum, which things are within our control, which things require us to bring in external parties to help us to make a difference. So, in order to be able to sort of bring this into a bit more context, we also need to really give a much better idea about how much this is costing us. And Chifra, who's on the call and on the panel today, and I, plus another colleague, have been working under the auspices of the MRS's data quality working group to actually try to estimate the financial impact in the UK. Now we've come up with a figure of 209 million. That at the moment it's very much a rough estimate and is based upon a whole series of metrics that you can see on screen here. We've looked at things like the resource time, the average salary and estimated proportion of time allocated to data quality. We've looked at things like the buying of samples and the cost of refilling and incentives for fraudulent qual and quant recruitment. We've looked at things like repeat translation coding costs, how much staff time is spent redoing those kinds of things. The cost of incentives, of course, if you've got fraudulent participants, how much extra incentives are being having to be paid for. Also, things like the license fees for external data solutions. So, how much UK businesses are actually buying external solutions and the kind of against total number of studies. And then also looking at those businesses that have invested in internal and bespoke solutions and how much those kind of solutions will cost, as well as looking at things like client management and obviously compensation costs as well. We believe this is a very modest figure, but we needed to start somewhere, because if we can't really specify how much it's costing, how can we expect other parties, external parties, to take us seriously when we're saying this is a big problem? But also another part of understanding the size and scale of the problem is defining what good data quality looks like. And generally, this has been a qualitative discussion. So the GDQ benchmark study was launched by the Insights Association in 2024 to try to bring a bit of a quantitative element to this whole discussion. And the first wave, which we're calling Wave Zero, was launched in the US last year. Now, the study is actually now being rolled out to 13 countries, including the UK, in 2025, and the data collection is taking place at the moment. Now, the whole aim of this project is to define what quality benchmarks look like, set the standards or norms that can be measured and assess performance over time, provide industry benchmarks which businesses can use to determine their own corporate performance, and track the metrics over time to measure whether data quality is improving or not. So let's have a look at some of these figures. Let's see what's going on. Well, this is the results from Wave Zero that I'm going to show you. And just to give you an idea, we've got a number of preliminary benchmarks which have been developed. And they're currently descriptive, but the end goal is for the benchmarks to be normative. But we've looked at things like device type, use of link encryption, length of interview, abandon rate, fraud removal rate, in-survey clean-out rate, post-survey clean-out rate, and incidence rate. So let's have a look at some of those figures. This is the one that probably depresses me the most, which is the use of link encryption. This is defined as server-to-server link encryption or formula encryption. And of the samples that we had, 71.2% of suppliers and 62% of agencies were using end-link encryption. Now, one of the key things, one of the best ways of preventing things like ghost completes is to use server-to-server link encryption. And so the fact that there is still, nearly 40%, nearly 30% on the supply side, that nearly 40% on the agency side of studies that are still not using end-link encryption is a really big issue that actually, if solved, could at least take away one big chunk of that fraud spectrum that I was talking about, which are all those ghost completes that are taking place out in the market. But also, what else is going on? Well, here's some of the other benchmark data we've got. So for things like pre-survey removal rates, for sample providers, the fraud removals were 4%, but the total removals were 21%. Now, I think that comes back to this point that I raised earlier regarding the language we use. This, oh, I'm removing 40% by fraud. I think for a lot of providers and agencies, lots of samples are being removed, but not necessarily for fraud in terms of the pure definition of fraud, but because there's other problems with the data. Now, that could be that they're failing quality flags. It could be because participants are inattentive, because they're bored, because they're sitting at a questionnaire that's taking them 25 minutes. There could be a whole host of reasons, but actually being able to split out between those that are genuine fraud and those that are problematic is really, really important, because again, thinking about that spectrum of fraud and also the total quality framework and how we address the issues that are generating all data quality problems, it's knowing which solutions are going to solve which problems and making sure that we've correctly identified what the problems are in order that we're focusing our solutions in the right way. But also, I think one of the other interesting statistics here, if you like, is the mirror to what's going on with the sample providers, is the in-survey clean out rate. So when you look at research agencies, again, fraud removals round about 4%, total removals, on the other hand, over 40%. So again, that it shows an issue and is a red flag in terms of what is going on in terms of the sample provider and also what's going on once samples are being used by research agencies. But I think one of the other interesting things to note here is the length of interview. For sample providers, 14.9 minutes. The length of interviews for research agencies is less at 11.9. And again, this whole dynamic of how much cognitive load we're putting onto participants, what we're asking them, how we're asking, how long it's taking. All of these things are really, really important drivers also to the participant experience, and also to also things like straight lining and all of those other kind of signals, those data quality tests and checks that we do to see if we can identify where the problems are. So what effect is all this having? Well, the GRBN did a sample of did a research project rather of online sample providers, which we did with 4 of the GDQ partners, which was the MRS, the Cricket in Canada, the Insights Association in the US, and the Research Society of Australia. And one of the questions we asked, which I think is very relevant for the panel discussion coming up, is, whether buyers have an opinion on the impact of AI on online sample quality. Whilst the large majority of buyers didn't really have an opinion of the impact of AI on sample quality, whilst among those that did, the majority perceived the impact as negative, which I think is important to note. But also we asked kind of the average percentage of cases removed as part of the data cleaning efforts. And removing of a large number of cases is common practice, in particular with respect to B2B samples, with 1/3 of buyers on average removing 30% or more of cases. So if you think about the GDQ benchmarks that I just talked about, and also the experience from this survey, we're starting to see here some trends and patterns coming through. And overall, the satisfaction amongst most buyers of online sample is actually higher among business to consumer sample buyers, but less so amongst those business to business. And I think that is one of the things that we have definitely had quite a lot of reports of, is that whilst their issues are worrying in business to consumer, they are much more concerning within business to business. Now, the actual satisfaction, of course, for those that are buying business to consumer samples is actually driven by the higher satisfaction in both speed and price compared to the satisfaction on those factors among business to business sample providers. But both buyer groups shows slightly below average satisfaction with the quality of the sample. So what we've got here is a very wonky 3-legged stool, which is that there is this high satisfaction in speed and price, but not the satisfaction in quality. And as we know, if you want speed and if you want a low price, quality is the thing that is being sacrificed. And so what we need to do is rebalance the wonky stool to think more about how we adjust particularly this price and therefore the speed in terms of what quality measures are being put in place to mean that you get a better balance in the satisfaction, so that you get satisfaction across all 3 measures rather than just 2. So that gives you a sort of bit of an indication of some of the initial metrics that we've been gathering. But both those studies, both the GRBN study and also the IA's benchmark study, are both Wave Zero projects. And both of them are out in the field at the moment for the next wave. So we will start to build up a picture as we do additional waves. We will really start to build up a picture. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Are some things moving and going in the right direction, other things not? So that we can start to then also think about where we need to focus our efforts. But in the meantime, we are continuing to produce lots of outputs and lots of tools and standards to help practitioners to help themselves. The first and probably the most important actually is Data Quality Glossary, which was developed by the MRS and the Insights Association in the US. Because in order to be all having the same conversation, we need to be using the same types of language to describe the issues that we're facing. And so that's where the glossary comes in useful. MRS, together with our Austrian colleagues, VMO, have also developed an internal approaches guidance. Now, this document is like a compendium of different techniques, over 30 techniques, which can be used to help to address data quality. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We've also, as MRS, produced a visualization of the sample ecosystem. So if you remember right at the beginning, I talked about one of the challenges is that the ecosystem is really complicated and it's not very well understood. So this visualization of the sample ecosystem that has been produced by MRS is a way to try to help both buyers but also suppliers understand more about what's going on in terms of that sample ecosystem, so that to get an appreciation of why certain problems happen and the steps that can be taken to try to alleviate that. And one step can be to complete the MRS Data Quality Transparency Checklist, which is another tool which we've produced as part of the GDQ. And this covers a series of scenarios about buying different types of sample and this difficulties and issues you might identify and how to deal with them, and the questions you should be asking providers to help you to understand the ecosystem a bit more, to understand more about maybe some of the problems that you're encountering with samples, and to give you a framework for much more of informed discussion that can take place as a consequence. On the last big project from an MRS side is also the mobile optimization research, which actually we've been doing since 2018, and was originally conceived because there were problems specifically with mobile optimization of research projects. But that is very much part of the global data quality as well, because it's a classic of a problem that was identified, which was optimization. We created a way to track what's going on. We, as I say, have been collecting data since 2018. We have a report and guidance which has come as a result of that research about how to do mobile optimization much better. That, in many ways, has worked as the template approach for many of the projects that we're doing under GDQ now. But it's not just about MRS and our other association colleagues. There are other GDQ partners that have produced some excellent outputs. Most important, I think, is SampleCon, who've produced a guidance on end-link fraud in survey research and how to use secure end links. Our colleagues in Canada, CRIC, they've produced a buyer's data guide for data quality, which is to kind of really to help end buyers and clients really understand some of the data quality challenges. ESMA has produced some great guidance on improvement in research participant experience. So, really just trying to understand what's going on in terms of people's experience and also to improve that. There is the ESMA has also developed the 37 questions to help online buyers. And the GRBN has produced the online sample buyer sentiment survey, which obviously I touched upon earlier today. So there's loads of materials out there, and I've provided links for all of them. They're all available on the GDQ website. But I just thought I'd do a little bit of a deep dive into a couple of the things quickly. The first is the transparency checklist. This is what it looks like. And as I say, it really helps to give you guidance on what a good response looks like in terms of the questions and answers you would be expecting from sample providers. The internal approaches guidance, really do recommend you have a look at that for addressing data quality challenges. It covers all of techniques from things like straight lining, open-end checks, link security, data analysis checks, and so on. And for each technique, you've got things like descriptions of the technique, whether it's applicable to quant and qual, the data protection implications, whether it's readily available, all of those kinds of things. It's a really good way of being able to understand what is going on in terms of and what you can apply and use yourselves when trying to address data quality. But of course, I think it's also important to understand those suppliers that have made a commitment to data quality already. And the GDQ Data Quality Pledge, which was launched earlier this year, is a comprehensive framework that calls on industry associations to really uphold rigorous data quality standards, provide the transparency, protect participants, educate and collaborate, and actively participate in GDQ initiatives. And the GDQ pledge is split under each of those pillars. I'm not going to go through each of the points now, but the important thing is this is a very comprehensive pledge by organizations to data quality. To get access to the pledge and see the companies that have signed up to the pledge, there's a nice large QR code there for you to use. I do encourage you to have a look at it. For those of you who are buying samples or using research suppliers, is a good way to see whether your suppliers are signed up to the pledge. And similarly, for those of you who are in the supply chain, to see what others are doing as well. Next up for GDQ, well, for MRS, we're looking at things like participant verification. We are working with the Home Office and the police. These are our external stakeholders to have research fraud recognised as a distinct type of fraud crime. We're also looking to document and classify third-party data quality and security solutions. We're also working with our qualitative colleagues, AQR and QRCA, to produce some new guides to help practitioners to reduce fraud in qualitative research. And we're also working with SampleCon to explore a feedback loop about whether we can standardize that whole process of coding and feeding back information when problematic records are found within sampling. And also our association colleagues, the Insights Association, MRS, and some other partners, we're rolling out those new quantitative benchmarks that I talked about. And our colleagues in Australia are soon to launch new guidance on incentives, which I really encourage you to look at, which will supplement some operational incentive guidance, which has also been developed by GDQ. What we need from you, let us know if you missed anything. These are all the existing GDQ outputs, the glossary, the internal approaches, the end-link guidance, all of these sorts of things. But if you can see things within those that you'd expect to see in there that are not there, please let us know. Share the materials with colleagues. Use the best practice tools and guidance to improve data quality. But do engage with us and our future activities, because this is a whole market solution. We need you. We need all of you to be engaged. We need all of us to be working together, moving in a single direction on this data quality journey so that we continue to improve. And that was my last slide. So there's a bit of a canter there through the data quality challenges. I do have some time for questions if there are any that people wish to ask.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for that truly insightful presentation. I think we can all take away a lot from what you shared, especially when it comes to benchmarking, to data cleaning, to the actual costs of that data, to the resources that are out there provided by the MRS, by the GDQ. I also really like the full quality framework that you presented in the beginning. And I think it is very eye-opening to also see these issues laid out in numbers. It really puts into perspective how much is at stake in our industry and why investing in trust and transparency and data quality is so critical. What I found quite interesting is also that the majority has no opinion about the impact of AI on data quality. I think we have some
that will change, I think.
Yeah, I hope so, especially after the panel discussion. I hope we can dig a little bit deeper into this topic. We've already received a couple of questions from the audience for you, and I'd love to read them out to you, Deborah.
Yeah.
The first one is if you can recommend anything for buyers to do, to watch out for, to request from suppliers. Are there any best practices from the MRS or the GDQ you can share? I think you already mentioned, right, the transparency checklist.
Yeah.
You mentioned the pledge that companies have signed. Is there anything you want to highlight in particular?
I think an important question as well is just to ask your suppliers what they are doing. Not in terms of saying in generally, but to say specifically what are they doing regarding data quality, and to actually ask the question of them, because until you understand where they are focusing their efforts, it might be that then they're doing the things you absolutely expect them to be doing, but they might also not be doing the things that you're expecting them to do. So it needs to be a real kind of two-way conversation about the activities. But do look out for the pledge. Obviously, that's the most outwardly expression of a commitment by an organization to data quality.
And I think that already leads me to another question that we received from the audience. The pledge that many companies have signed already. What happens if a company on this list shows patterns of not trying to eliminate fraud?
Yeah.
How are companies being held to the GDQ pledge?
Yeah, that's a very good question. One of the key criteria for the pledge, for organizations wishing to sign up to the pledge, is that they must be a member of one of the associations which are the partner associations of GDQ. And the reason why we've said that they must be a member of at least one of those partner associations is because those organizations have complaint procedures and mechanisms for undertaking investigations and being able to make judgments on whether members have followed the requirements. And so the intention is if we receive complaints, is that the complaints would be referred to whichever partner association an organization is a member of, and then that organization would then use its disciplinary procedures and complaint procedures to investigate. And ultimately, we could remove the pledge recognition if we found that there's an organization that is making claims that it meets the pledge and it doesn't.
And another related question is whether there will be any minimum quality standards that are going to be recommended for sample providers and agencies? And are you going to set targets on the measures that you're including in the survey? I guess it's with regards to the benchmarking.
Yes, I think that is the direction of travel, I think. But because we're at the beginning of that journey, we need to kind of get the benchmark data and actually just sort of see the range out there. Because obviously, I say the first wave was only done in the US. Now we're doing 13 markets. We're going to get a lot more data to have a look at. Um, and so once we can start to see the variation within that data and also the different trends, with our country trends, is there some, where are the similarities, where are the differences? Then we can start thinking about, well, what does good look like, and what might be the minimum thresholds as well.
There was one really good question, or I think it's rather a suggestion. Do you plan to map visually the respondent's journey or funnel? That would greatly help to align everyone on the metric definitions, like in-survey removals, post-survey removals, etc. And I think it's a great point, because when I read the benchmarking, I was also trying to figure out like what it all means. And I think you mentioned one very important information, which is the 40% removal rate. I think it was in survey, is not only due to fraud, it's poor quality data, right?
Yes,
But it's
exactly.
it's also inattentive respondents, or
a poor participant experience,
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
A mixture of issues. No, I absolutely. And I think as with all of these, kinds of things, I think that the more familiar we get with the metrics and the glossary and the language, then I think it will help in terms of making sure that we're all sort of talking about the same things. The glossary is a really important document in that respect, because that sort of sets the framework, the language framework for how we talk about data quality. But again, and so for example, if there are phrases or terms that are used a lot in your markets that you can't see in the data glossary, then let us know, because then we can then add them to it, because it should be something that is universal.
And I think that's a good it's good to mention this again, that it's a collaborative effort, right? And everyone is also invited to contribute, and to firstly to share learnings, and to also share what could be helpful for the industry as a whole, and also to read such reports and to use such reports or pledges, etc. There was one more question regarding frequent survey takers. If there's anything the MRS can do about it, and if you think they exist, I mean, yeah, I'll leave it to you, Debrah.
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, of course, is there's two types of frequent survey takers. There's those with bad intent and those with good intent. So there are some people for whom it's taking multiple surveys is just about trying to earn extra money, and that's it, and they don't really care whether they give good data or not. Then there are those with good intent who actually just really enjoy taking part in research, always pay attention, always give good data. Now, they are both professional participants, but they're very, very different. But the important thing is that you need to be able to have data quality measures in for both sets, because even those with good intent, you have to recognize the fact that that they have their awareness of research means that the way that they respond to surveys may no longer be typical, because they've got knowledge about research, doing lots and lots of research, which may actually make them no longer typical of the population that they're meant to represent. So both sets need to be dealing with. The bad intent is a real problem. But going back to, whether we can have a master list of all of these awful people that are with bad intent, data protection and GDPR make that quite challenging thing to do, because what you can't do is you can't label somebody as being definitely a fraudulent participant unless you've got absolutely solid evidence that that is the case, because they could claim harm, and they could claim that they've been rebranded to be a criminal when actually they're not. There's lots of risks attached to making sweeping statements about people unless you've got solid evidence to back it up. And similarly, companies sharing lists about bad participants, you've got to be really careful not to sort of trip over things like anti-competition law, acting like a monopoly, all of those kind of commercial risks that we all have to be aware of. So whilst it sounds like it could be a really good solution, the practical challenges of actually managing something like that is actually quite difficult.
Thank you so much, Deborah, both for your presentation and for your answers as part of this Q&A. We are very, very happy to have you stay with us a little bit longer, because Deborah is also part of our panel discussion later on, so we can continue the conversation actually now. So because it's time for our grande finale, for our of our quality days, a panel discussion on one of the most hotly debated topics in our industry, AI in market research. Is it a blessing, a curse, or is it a wake-up call? And before we dive into the discussion, I thought it might be helpful to briefly introduce our panelists so you get a feel for who's joining us on screen and who's answering the tough questions today. Deborah, if you want to end your screen sharing so we can also see the other panelists. And yes, here they are, perfect. I think it's a truly exciting and a diverse group, and I'm really looking forward to the perspectives they will bring. You already know Debrah Harding, who will stay with us for this discussion. And joining us is Oskar Carlson. He's founder and CEO of Milo Advisory. Many of you may know Oskar, and to put it bluntly, just a few days ago, a client from the US said to us, "Oh, Oskar is joining for your quality day. Oskar is the center of the universe in market research. He knows everyone." And honestly, we believe that. But of course, Oskar is much more than a good networker. He's also a brilliant strategy advisor and an investor, a believer in the industry. And before that, he also played key roles in scaling Sint, supporting multiple funding rounds from Series A to Series C, transactions with PE and IPO, and several strategic acquisitions. So it's great to have you with us today, Oskar.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Next, we have Hartmut Scheffler, also a highly respected figure in the market and social research. Hartmut has held C-level positions at renowned institutions such as MNIT, TNS, and Kantar, and today he advises clients, startups, and other market research players on research and brand strategy, with a strong focus on quality standards and methodology. And Hartmut has really seen the industry go through so many changes, ups and downs, and it's great to have someone with so many years, and I want to say decades, of industry experience with us. So thank you for joining us, Hartmut.
Thanks for being here.
Also with us today is Shifra Cook. Shifra has also over 20 years of experience in research and in advertising, and is the founder and CEO of Ada. Ada is a platform that checks the authenticity of participants by verifying, for example, their bank account details and that kind of data. We are really, really happy to have you with us today, Shifra. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you very much.
And finally, many of you already know Florian Kögel. He was one of our speakers last week. Florian is the founder and CEO of ReDem, and he drives our mission at ReDem on survey data quality and fraud detection. And apart from his role at ReDem, he also serves as chairman of the Austrian Market Research Association, VMÖ, and is Austria's ESOMAR representative. And like Debrah and Shifra, he's also part of the Global Data Quality Initiative. So we've got some big questions ahead, and I'm really glad we have such a diverse group of experts with us to help unpack them. AI, as we know, is already changing the way we collect data, the way we analyze data and deliver insights. But the big question is AI actually solving some of our biggest challenges, or is it creating new ones? And to get us started, here's a quick question to all of you. What is it for you in one word? Is AI a blessing? Is it a curse or a wake-up call for our industry?
I'll go ahead and start if I may. So I'm the type of person that always embrace change, and I think it's it can always be for the better, and I think in the long run it will be for the better. But we're currently going through sort of an area where everything is new. It's a lot of disruption. It's a lot of people making use of AI early and maybe not for all the sort of good causes. But I think over time, definitely we'll see the benefits of AI as all industrial and technological revolutions that we've seen in the past, but definitely will be some shakeups during the way.
I think my answer is, as usual, it depends. It depends. I think there is no doubt that that is a kind of at least transformation, maybe even disruptive to the branch. And the opportunities AI is bringing to the branch are extreme in quantity and quality interesting. So there is a huge chance if, and that is the point, maybe I will come back to it a lot of times today, if people using it are competent, well-trained, are understanding what's going on, where to have a look on, and so on. So doing it by competent people, by well-trained people, it is a step forward for the whole branch, bringing some new problems as fraud with AI. You have to find solutions with AI. That's a special theme. But all in all, if we associations, we all together are able to train people to make clear it is not allowing to do market research without knowledge, it means to do it with more knowledge than ever using AI, then it is a step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think building on that, the scalability and the amount of innovation that AI brings to the sector is beyond compare. Not anything that I've seen in the past 2 decades, from synthetic data and the sort of exciting abilities of that through to the speed at which you can start to now analyze and bring reports. But of course, on the flip side, as you well know, and have first-hand experience on, I think that it's AI is a very democratic tool, and therefore in terms of the quality of data that we might be getting and the thoughtfulness of that, with increased use of ChatGPT and AI by people that are taking part in research, it's we could end up with computers talking to computers or AI talking to AI, and I think that's the sort of the danger of it. So it's kind of, it depends, and it's both, right? It's very exciting, and then also I think we have to make sure that we keep our eyes open and that we don't end up in a situation where we've relinquished so much. Not control, but I guess oversight maybe, and human in the loop, is for want of a better expression, that we are just perpetuating existing data and bias that are out there. That's the danger for us, right?
Good points here. I'm also a big believer in tech and see more the opportunities. But of course, if we look at AI itself, it can be used as a huge, for a lot of positive things in our industry, as in all other industries as well. But it can also be used as a weapon against us. And I think what's very important for us as an industry in general is to be knowledgeable, to know the different things, to know the tools, and also the way how to use them. I think that's important in order to use AI for the good.
I think the point that Shifra raised about the human in the loop, my preference is about the professional in the loop. So this isn't just about any old bod who just kind of, as long as the data's been looked at by somebody else, therefore it's okay. Actually, the role of the professional, somebody who is competent, somebody who understands the ethics, to somebody who understands the fundamentals of research and insight, looking at the data is really, really important. And if you've got that combination of technology and the professional, with the kind of professional underpinnings that you'd expect underneath that, the appropriate codes, guides, and all those sorts of things, then I feel optimistic about it. When I'm more pessimistic is that the research sector has a very bad track record of using new things in the market to solve old problems, and by doing so, that solution becomes the new problem. You know, response rates was a big problem. We created panels and sort of samples. Then data quality became a problem. Data quality is now a problem. We're looking at AI as a way of potentially getting around some of that. So what we have to be sure is that we don't suddenly create the new problem for the research sector by abusing and misusing AI.
What makes me a little bit optimistic is that 1 year ago or 1.5 years ago, some people were very drunk. That was, they believed in everything and so on and so on. And that changed. What I see here is a realistic understanding of the opportunities and what it means and needs. So I never saw, I must say, in our branch that within only 2 years, there was such a swing from it's horrible, then the ghost is out of the bottle, we have to work with the ghost, to enthusiasm without reasons, and now a relatively realistic, all in all, realistic situation. That means some are still drunken and some are still not realistic, but the main situation is that. And that makes me hopeful that we will find a good way in a hybrid AI plus HI, human intelligence world. It's, I think we all are working on that, isn't it?
To the downside, I think one thing to add, there has been a great session by Efrain Riviera. It was at the first Quality Day, and he mentioned exactly what you said, Debrah, that in the past, the industry had this tendency to solve problems with certain technologies and solutions that then created the next problem. I think that was definitely something very interesting to hear for everyone as part of the audience who missed the first Quality Day. And I think listening to all your answers, your view is quite optimistic, I would say. So let's dig a bit deeper into the opportunities. And Oscar, you have worked closely with many startups and new companies in the market research and res tech field, and might have a strong view of what's happening at the tech frontier of our industry, since you speak probably to many players, experimenting also with AI in very different ways. So where do you see the biggest opportunities for AI in market research today? And I know that's a bit tougher to answer, but maybe also potential untapped opportunities.
Yeah, if I knew all the untapped opportunities, I would probably be in a different place. But I think really there's different ways to look at it. We're looking at how we do research today, and there's a lot of ways to use AI to make that entire process a lot more efficient. Everything from survey scripting to data reporting, summarization, transcription. There's so many avenues where we're already using AI to create efficiencies for our fieldwork teams, essentially. And there's smaller boutique agencies that can do so much more research. And then we have professionals in the loop that are sort of verifying the output and using AI in very smart ways and using it as a superpower, essentially, to work a lot more efficient and to focus their time on where they actually create real value. So I think that's a huge benefit that we're already seeing today. I think more companies should probably adopt and do that as well. We have new areas and new types of research like simulations and personas and synthetic, which is really that area where I think that's more experimental at the moment. It's a lot of companies, new companies coming into the space, offering new solutions. Trying things out, getting some of the early adopters to try that out to see what's viable, what's not, what are the pitfalls. And then I think we learned a lot in the last couple of years on where synthetic is actually playing a big role in helping us, and where it maybe is not creating any sort of real values compared to what we do today. It's already fairly sort of cost effective doing quant research, and then do we really need an AI to provide answers for us when we have real people in a really efficient way? But in other areas, hard to reach audiences, or we're creating 10 or 15 different simulations, then we can use AI to provide guidance. So I think that's still something that's growing. We will probably see that happening a lot more, and more types of research that we'll start doing. And then I think overall we'll see a lot more efficiencies and optimization from AI, not to maybe create lower cost products to our customers, but create more efficiencies and maybe untap new insights, which we don't really have the bandwidth to understand today, but we can use machine learning and AI to really go into predictions and so on with the data that we're capturing, with the human data that we're capturing, but then also seeing and extrapolating that and seeing where that can bring us in a couple of different scenarios. So definitely new types of research will come, and I encourage everyone to try new things because there's things that we haven't realized that can be good for, and then that we can commercialize and bring to our customers.
I think there's one point sometimes not seen at the beginning. It was for most of the people clear. It is cost reduction. It brings cost reduction, time reduction, but quality is the question. By the way, cost reduction not always. Not always, and even time reduction not always. If you are building up proprietary AI systems in your company, you have to bring in data, you have to build up the system, and so on. So this process needs time and also money. But what always was seen at the beginning was, but it's not that quality thing, and that's quality too, because what it brings is pattern recognition is something very new. To handle a huge number of data within seconds, and if you want real time, makes quality. Building checklists and so on for a researcher not to forget something is a quality aspect. And at the end, it's even quality checks by AI. So we have not only cost and time, what were the arguments at the beginning, but a lot of quality advantages too.
We have seen in Debrah's presentation that the satisfaction with quality is still low, right? While the satisfaction with speed and cost is kind of okay or high. So to Hartmut's point, now we have AI, we have those opportunities. We use AI also for data quality purposes. What do you think is missing? What is the missing link?
I think the real problem is about some honesty and transparency about the fact that actually for some projects you might need relatively low quality. The kind of quality checks that are needed. It's just an indicator. It's the demands of the data is relatively low, and so good enough data might be okay for that purpose. Whereas for other projects where there's high risk and there's a lot of corporate investment and so on, you need to be sure that you've got really the best data that you can possibly have. And I do think that sometimes we just need to have a very honest conversation about the fact that there is a spectrum of data quality, and it's not all about being the best data. If there is good enough data and and businesses are prepared to pay this much for that kind of data, but if you want really, really good and really good quality, then you need to pay this much, and it might take longer. But what you're going to get is fit for purpose. And I think this kind of the need to have a proper, honest discussion about fit for purpose data is a part of the grown-up conversation that we need to be having, I think, because what we can't pretend is that you can just give that people can have and businesses can have the high quality data they want for paying 10p a sample or whatever. It can't be delivered, and AI is not going to deliver that. That AI is many things, but it's not going to deliver high quality data for really low cost. If you want high quality data, you're going to still have to pay for it.
Absolutely. And I think building on that point, then what we kind of get into is this: what does quality mean? And I think that we're kind of somewhat and we've done a lot of work in the GDQ, but an actual definition of what is quality, what are the different metrics that the variables that you can look at, and having clarity and transparency on that fast, cheap, and good is never really, well, very rarely possible, right? And so good enough it might be, but fast, cheap, and high quality. But it's like, what is high quality? What does that mean? Does it, in some instances, it might mean highly verified. In some instances, it might mean that person that's highly verified is also not engaged, right? So it's all the different metrics and being able to pick and choose between that. And I think there's a lot of education for the end client, really, that probably also needs to happen as we bring them along on this journey, so that they can also understand what they're getting. Because I think half of the time, if they're not actually directly involved in the process and buying data directly themselves, if they're outsourcing, there's just this lack of visibility, and therefore not my problem, and therefore do not care, and therefore the pushback down, and like, can't I have it cheaper? And so then we're back in that sort of perpetuating cycle. And I think that's really something that needs addressing as part of this journey, to sort of bring the client along with us, the end client.
It's a good point. Especially what popped up into my head is basically the synthetic respondent part, because what we discussed here, that if there's no room for, there is basically a spectrum of data quality. And I mean, if I would assume, or if I look into the future, or how the future could be, then I could also imagine that we have a situation that we have what is now called low quality data, and it's done in a kind of limited way, will be done with AI synthetic respondents, and only the really high quality stuff where very, very important decisions are based on, that would be then based on human respondents. That could be a future that I could imagine, if we put the things together, because with AI synthetic respondents, you could also get a rough feeling in which direction the market could go, and if that's the purpose of your study, then it's fine, and maybe it's as a quick pretest or something like this. That could also be something that we have this switch from human respondents. The human respondents have to be high quality, but we have other use cases where AI respondents are sufficient enough, maybe.
I think that is really an underestimated point so far. The relevance of training data and the connection between training surveys as training data for AI systems, especially for AI persona or for AI synthetic interviews, or whatever the name is, to make clear, it's also garbage in, garbage out, as so often, but here it's very, very relevant. What I would like to add is, from my understanding, we have two areas of quality. One is the quality in the process, analysis, and so on and so on. Analysis depends on data quality, of course, but that is, let's call it quality in process. And there AI brings advantages because it doesn't forget. You must add human knowledge in the sense of context, understanding client situation, and so on. But all in all, there is a quality plus in that area. And then we have the data quality as a most important point, no doubt. And there, and that is surprising for me, I realized very often this misunderstanding of what can happen with poor data, not only in that survey, but for the next 20 years, because these data can be part of different AI systems, proprietary systems in the company, general systems, whatever. And that is not really understood so far, from my understanding.
I think it's a really valid point, and building on that, that's why it's also such a data quality and fraud is such a hard problem to solve, because for the end customer, the end client, you start sort of, opens a Pandora's box, right? You start saying, well, hang on, if there's fraud or poor data quality now, what happened last year and the year before? And so then you kind of almost, bring so many questions into the discussion or into the fold, that it becomes potentially a little bit dangerous, right? And maybe something that they don't want to look at, because it's complex. It's very complex to then go back to colleagues and say, well, it's very different this year because we've taken the time to do our checks on the data quality, whereas last year we didn't. It's not a good look. So I think it's how we can help end clients on that journey, because that's very sensitive.
I think it's a really, really good point, Shifra. And I was speaking to an end client who works in the financial sector, and they reported to me that they are spending 60% of their time on data quality. This is an end client spending 60% of their time on data quality. Now, of course, they're a regulated sector, pharmaceuticals, health, healthcare, financial, these sectors tend to have more awareness of these issues. But that is an enormous shift. And she was saying herself, she looks at her role now and she looks at what it was like 3 years ago, and it's unrecognizable. And that's from a client side perspective, that end buyer perspective. And I think that really shows that there is a big shift. And those kinds of clients are very aware of these data quality issues and are really working clearly very hard to address them. Whereas, I've spoken to other clients for which it's kind of like, this is a supplier problem, and it's very much kind of it's not on my doorstep sort of thing. So that these are big issues. But for me, the one thing that if I worry about the most is probably synthetic data. I think synthetic data has all the hallmarks of the next problem the research sector can face if it doesn't do it properly. Because actually to create great synthetic data requires fantastic primary data. And so how to get that fantastic primary data in the first place is still an issue. And so when I think about sort of the thing that keeps me up at night is with the AI question is definitely if we get synthetic data wrong, we create ourselves a very, very big problem.
I completely agree. I think you need to be sober when you sort of look at synthetic data and critical thinking, which not everyone has, right? Which I think is a responsibility for this industry to explain to customers and guide customers and best practice around using synthetic data. And that's why we need to start using it, start trying it and experimenting and so on. So I think that's so important to really understand a lot better before it's released in the wild completely and replacing some of the traditional research that companies are doing today. But I think a really important point, I think, Shifra, you raised that early on, is the definition of quality. And now we're living in such a fragmented ecosystem. And then I think I'm probably part of the problem with my former company and how we sort of fragmented the market and had panels specializing in panels, being very good at recruiting panels and delivering panel data. And then we have agencies focusing on the research part. But I think in all of that, we also need to understand that all of us are responsible for our different bits and pieces, because not everyone is seeing the entire picture. We need to make sure that the info of panelists is as good as it can be, the history of panelists and all the checks that we can do on the panel side, but also on the agency side, we need to, as your client, Debrah, that you were talking to, you need to actually look at the data and understand the data to see if it's anything bad that's coming through, because not everyone is seeing that. We need to have the feedback to report back what's good and bad. But I think here AI can play a really big role. It doesn't sound like they're using AI and then they're spending 60% of their time looking at the data. They could probably be a lot more efficient on that side, because I think that's one of the main benefits where we can improve now and check more of the data that we didn't check before, because we just send it off to our customers. And the definitions of quality is so vastly different from an end customer to a research agency to a panel company. And end customer, they include things like overall deliverability and quality of service and so on in the definition of quality. It's not only the panel data, so which we are so focused on and inside the industry, right? So we need to understand the full picture and how we can work together to really improve the delivery to the end customers and the insights on time that's reliable, so we don't have to pull anything back, but be really so tight within the industry and transparent, as you say, which I think is key for us to improve the overall sort of output from the industry.
To your point, Oscar, regarding accountability and responsibility for data cleaning, last week at IX, there was a lot of talk about insourcing of data quality checks and assurance. And is exactly as you said, Debrah, when you talk to your client, that buyers start insourcing data cleaning again and looking very closely at the data that they get, and sometimes also doing the data cleaning in-house, something that they initially or in the past outsourced or left to someone else. And with AI, we definitely also see a threat, because that data and fraud is getting harder to detect. That's something that we also see at ReDem. So question to you, Florian, what is it that you read a lot about data quality, you look very closely also into the data that we get and run through the tool. What is it exactly that you observe with AI when it comes to data quality, and are there any tips and recommendations that you can maybe share also with the audience when it comes to AI powered fraud?
Yeah, so good question. I mean, there are a couple of different behaviors we see, of course. I mean, the typical thing we see is are the AI generated open ends. I think that some of them are recognizable because they're too good to be true. That's one thing if we look on quantitative studies. But others, if you prompt the AI correctly, then of course it produces answers that you cannot really distinguish from human ones. So that's one thing we see. Then also additionally is of course looking at the behavior part. I think that's getting much more important, especially when it comes to the future, because I think we're moving away from the output focused part to more to the input focused part. So output, it's very hard, especially when it comes to the future, to distinguish what's real and what's artificially created. So that's also another important thing. For example, keystrokes, another very, very important topic. Then especially in combination with the output part plus the input part, I think that is kind of something that works quite well right now.
What's your take on this, Shifra? You and Ada, your team, you also work on data quality. You deal with the topic of fraud and data quality improvement in the industry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you, Julia. So yeah, I mean, building on that, I think for us at Ada, it's very much more about actually the sort of participant or respondent centric view. So not so much the data that they're providing, we can't help you with that, but essentially have you got a real person in the first place, and have you got a real person once, and have you got a real person that is then essentially very, very active across the system, and do you know that? And I think that's some of the insight that's important to have before you even start collecting any data. And then that kind of goes a little bit further back into that, which is how are you treating those people in the first place? Because this is about our interaction as a business and as an industry with members of the public. And some practices are better than others, right, out there, I think. And the history maybe is as the industry has grown, and as we've sought to gather more data, it's become much more commoditized in terms of our thinking around how people are treated and sort of extracting from them, as opposed to a symbiotic relationship in terms of what we're giving back, their transparency on what they're seeing from us, understanding how their data is used, and understanding that they're going to be rewarded, and they are going to get a reward on fairly and on time. And I think that insight into do you have a real person? Do you have a real person once? And that value exchange of the information I'm providing you, and therefore what you're giving me, we kind of maybe lost sight of that a little bit in the drive to deliver for the end customer. I think that's and that probably that definitely needs addressing. Back to maybe Florian's point about sort of highly verified and then synthetic good enough is I suspect where we'll end up.
Since we already talk about the different solutions and what to check, real respondent ones. Also looking, this is like more what Ada does. ReDem, looking at what the respondent provides in the data. So we're already talking about solutions. A question to you, Debrah. You've been playing a leading role in shaping standards and also initiatives. What do you think it really takes to move the needle going forward? We have all those different tools now, right? We have the pledge, we have checklists. What is your take on what it needs going forward?
Yeah, the big change has to be buyer demand. This is about those that pay money demanding data quality. Unless they are prepared to make very clear sort of buying signals that they only buy, for example, from GDQ pledge signed companies, but also there has to be a recognition by the clients as well if they are demanding those things, that the price that they're going to have to pay for their data and for their samples and so on is going to increase. But I think that is the only thing, is buyer behavior, that is going to change the supply chain. You can have all the positive supply signals, you can have suppliers doing lots of really, really good things, but if buyers don't buy from them, they will go under, because to deliver quality costs more money, and if they haven't got the business, that they won't survive. So yeah, it has to be the buyers, and that's the reason why bringing the clients in, getting buyers into this conversation is essential and is a focus of GDQ's activities for 2025, because we've done lots of work getting lots of tools, lots of standards and all these things, and that's great. We provided the tools for the suppliers to use. Now we've got to bring the buyers into the conversations to recognize the value of investing in those tools and the value of those suppliers that understand what data quality looks like.
Debrah, may I add one point? I think the demand for quality means, of course, you already mentioned competence to do so, but this triangle has a third point, and that is, you mentioned, is transparency. I think the demand for transparency should be by far more intensive in future and in the world of AI than it is actually. And in that combination of, they are belonging together, quality, competence, and transparency. And that means for a supplier like ReDem is make transparent whatever you are doing, why you are doing, what the output is, and so on. You mentioned transparency beginning with the sampling process. That is right. So, and as long as clients are not asking for good quality and willing to pay more and asking for transparency to control, it's a horrible word, control, but yes, control is better than blind trust. As long as they are not doing that, we will have not always, but problems here, problems there in the future. So let's intensify our wish for transparency too, not only quality but also transparency.
A key part of the pledge, Hartmut, you'll be glad to know, is
about
about transparency.
Yeah, but it's simple to say.
Yes.
And frankly speaking, it's simple to ask for transparency, my supplier, to write it in the contract. You have to deliver transparency here, and here, and you have to do data quality check, and you have to be transparent in what you did and what the outcome was, and so on. It's not so difficult.
And to help with that, we've also worked with Shifra over the last couple of months to develop, and also with the help of the MRS, to develop a buyer guide to help buyers ask the right questions. And transparency and trust were the two guiding themes actually for the development of this guide, because eventually it's the buyers who will have to demand high quality data. And if they don't demand high quality data and they're willing to pay less, okay, but then it has to be transparent what they're getting. Since we've talked about this spectrum of data quality,
and they have to ask the right questions, or they have to be knowledgeable to ask the right questions. That's the thing. What we see a lot is that questions about data quality, they are asked in a too broad way. They're just saying, yeah, what are you doing in terms of data quality? And of course, this is a very open question, and you can say everything, and everything sounds sufficient. But if you ask, for example, what do you do against AI-generated answers concretely, then they have to provide a proper answer, right? So that's, I think, this kind of transparency and asking the right question, what it means, yeah.
Exactly, and we're also happy to share the buyer guide once it's out there with the ones who signed up for the quality days or whoever is interested in the buyer guide. There is one question or one topic that I want to talk about, which comes back to this responsibility part. Hartmut, you've been pushing for better data quality long before it was trendy, and you've seen how slow parts of the industry can be to act sometimes, especially when it comes to taking data quality seriously at the top level, at the leadership level. Do you think that data quality has finally become a board level priority, or is it still just lip service in most agencies or organizations?
Yeah, again, it depends. My understanding is it's not getting better than before. Quality was always an issue. What can happen was different, but it was an issue. And there were industries, branches like pharmaceutical, they have to take more care because of what's going on, and they have rules and so on. So the understanding of what quality is and means and costs is better in that area than in others. But even now, there are even global players where the quality aspect is not that relevant and important from my understanding, from my experience in the decision-making process, and then there's another one where it is. So you have to repeat and repeat and repeat again. You have to do the activities that Debrah presented. So we as the industry and as people that are believing in quality, and they are understanding that our branch without quality, I would even say has no future. We have disorientation by misinterpreting data. We have fraud. We have fraud in data creation, in answering, in making interviews, in interpretation, and so on worldwide. So if this branch is not able to make clear that you can't trust any data if a lot of data is wrong and has poor quality, so where can give you the impression that data is fine and correct and has a high quality and that not? If that is the understanding, our whole branch is under high risk. So your question was, it is getting better. My feeling is no, it's not getting worse, but it's a long way we have still in front of us with new issues, because all this AI whatever was not the case 2 years ago. We discussed respondent rates. We discussed biases in data. We discussed being representative with river samplings. We discussed the response rates and what it means, and that all is still on the table, plus the AI situation. So the quality issues are not less, and not the number of quality issues is growing with AI. The situation is more complex, but on the other hand, we have for most of it, if not all of it, we have solutions. It's not a question without any solution. You must say no problem, no answer. That's it. No, it's absolutely not the case. And our societies, our industry, public and all, need more and more data than ever before. Years ago, we have one target group. Now we have a target group in a special context, in a special daytime, and so on and so on. And you need special data for all of this. So the demand for data in politics and social also is growing. And that's the best story for us to make clear, yes, our responsibility is to do the best for a new understanding of quality. By the way, that is my risk to say AI, not HI. AI is allowing a democratization of the branch. It's a high risk for me if competence is not the case. That was with do-it-yourself the same. Everyone said, now we have democratic research systems. Everyone can do research of its own with small knowledge, not a lot of money. It works. No, it worked not. It works only with quality, understanding, competence, and transparency. So a long, long way.
That leads me perfectly to the last point actually I wanted to discuss today. How do we make sure we properly use the solutions that are out there? What skills are needed? What kind of competence do you think the industry needs to thrive in an AI reshaped landscape of this industry?
If I can start, maybe I'd like to sort of spend a bit on Hartmut's comments there. I believe, just going back to that question, it's higher up the agenda in boardrooms, and that's where it needs to be. It needs to be really high up, and we need to really give the tools to the decision makers that buy the data, the customers, to really control the demand on the high quality suppliers and make sure that companies in this space actually see a clear ROI on their investments in data quality, right? So they need to really sort of make sure that they get their money back if they invest in ReDem or any other quality solutions out there. And I think that the challenge right now is that buyers don't really know who is providing better data than others. They see anecdotal evidence and so on of that, but they can't see a clear picture. And over time, they give up hope and they say, okay, everyone is as bad and I just go for the lowest CPI, where we need to reward the ones that are actually performing better so they can charge more and they can recoup the investment that they're doing in data quality. So I think that's probably the biggest area we need to educate buyers and create different independent systems and so on to make sure that we give the different boardrooms an ROI on the quality investment, so it comes higher up on the agenda in the boardrooms, because then we'll see decisions being taken and investments being made. And I've been sort of part of different companies advising other companies, and I see that it takes forever and they're pushing decisions year after year and they're not making those investments because they're not sure if that will actually help and will generate more revenue for them. And that's the main crux of the problem, not the type of quality issues. Will solve that, but it is more around actually making investments and using the tools that's out there. I think that's the main thing that we need to do to help the industry and help the buyers in that area. I know that's a bit sort of not exactly the answer to your question, but I think that's really the thing that we need to work on together to try and solve, and then things will happen and create the dynamic to get more investments and more focus on data quality and prioritize it.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually, Oscar. I mean, I agree with you. I think strangely also the question that Julia asked, and also that your comment, I sort of see as two things together, because most CEOs of businesses are thinking about how to use AI in their business. How can AI deliver efficiencies and effectiveness and so on? But they're very conscious, particularly those in the larger businesses and those that are publicly listed, about governance, about ethics, about risk, about compliance, all of those considerations. And so what they're looking within their business is, well, where are those that are competent who would be advising on the use of AI systems and data? And actually, this is, I think, where the insight professionals within organizations, within businesses, the client-side practitioners, have a golden opportunity, because actually those that are really good at good insight professionals have got all the skills that are necessary to harness AI properly within a business. They understand data, they understand ethics, they understand how to create so workable frameworks to manage data. All of these kinds of things we could be in an age where the insight professional role really is elevated within a business, because they are seen as the natural home for managing and looking after the sort of AI systems that businesses know they need to invest in. That's, I think, is when I'm at my most optimistic in terms of, I think, because the skills that a really good insight professional has are the skills that are needed to manage AI. but they've got to be able to be given the opportunity to get into that position, and also to be sort of have the right skill set, have been invested in by their organizations, because there's going to be no one person within a business who's ideally qualified to deal with AI and the management of AI. But what you need to look at is parallel skills that actually can be adapted and utilized to make them the natural leaders for AI within a business. But so that's my kind of take on sort of answering your question, Julia, but also reflecting on Oscar's view.
Yeah, I'm a little bit fearing that there could be a misunderstanding that we need other new skills. Yes, we need new skills in understanding a little bit AI technology, understanding AI tools if they are transparent and so on, but not instead of the good old former skills we have, but additional to those, like understanding empirical social research, statistics, psychology, how human beings are thinking, acting, and so on. Which again brings me to that competence thing. Our branch and our staff must be more competent in this new world than it was ever in the past. The situation, it's more, not instead.
Debrah, was there anything you wanted to add? Because I saw you wanted to say something. Last chance.
Yeah,
before we wrap it up.
I think
I've also one thing.
What I was going to say is, I think it was sort of rewinding back to your question about how important this is sort of at a board level or not. I think because they haven't experienced the pain really. A lot of end clients have been sort of shielded, maybe apart from the customer Debrah was talking about, the end client where she's spending 60% of her time or a team are on cleaning data. A lot of businesses have been shielded from the impact of it. And although we've kind of seen recently some sort of scandals in the industry that sort of brought this to the fore, that's been really a different kind of thing. It's not necessarily been data quality or fraud from participants or respondents. So I think if there's the ability to show the pain and the consequence of acting on poor decisions or making decisions based on poor quality data, and how that would impact a business and the amount of potential revenue that they would lose as a consequence. If we're able to join the dots for businesses like that, I think that they will sit up and take notice, because at the minute, otherwise it feels quite far essentially removed from them. Although the costs that we've done and the costing that we've done with the GDQ shows the cost to the industry and the impact, joining that to the end customer and saying, as a consequence, you know that ad campaign that you would have run and spent 100 million on would all have ended differently if we had not cleaned the data this way. I think that makes it very real, and I think there's maybe some work for us to do there to show the consequence, and then people will sit up, I think.
Now, I'd like to answer the question in a more general way, I would say. So in my opinion, when it comes to skill set and also having a right mindset, I think in my opinion there are two main things that are relevant for the future. First, I would say thinking AI first. So what I mean by that is always ask yourself, can I do this with AI? It's just a very simple question. I try to do that as often I can. So it's basically these things are relevant for all different roles, but of course also specifically for researchers in the future. So first thing, can I do this with AI? And second thing is know and use the latest tech. So also in research, there are a lot of different tools, a lot of different possibilities, opportunities you can use, and I think you would have a huge competitive advantage if you use the right tools and if you know how to apply them. I think that's a very important thing. We in our company, we see that every day with just software engineering, how much difference it makes to use the right tech. and also to try to understand, okay, what's new. It's very dynamic. It changes in a very dynamic way. And I think we have to know the right things at the right time and apply it. And I think those are my 2 cents basically to the question.
So thank you all for your answers to that question. I think we all believe in a bright future if we use the right tools, if we make C-level to understand what the upside of investing in data quality is, and making them see what the costs to the industry and to the organization could be, as we've seen from Debrah and the conversations we had today. But I think we are also optimistic that AI can open up many opportunities for us in market research. And with that, we are coming to the end of this year's ReDem Quality Day. First of all, a big thank you to all our speakers, our panelists, and to everyone who joined us today. I really appreciated the different perspectives you brought in, and for me personally, it was very interesting to listen and to learn from each of you here today. I hope it was just as valuable for you in the audience. If you have any feedback, questions, or thoughts you didn't get a chance to share, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, or I think I can speak for you as well, to our speakers, to our panelists. And we're always happy to connect and maybe even welcome you as a speaker in the future if you're also passionate about data quality or have something you'd like to contribute. So thanks again for being here and for being part of this conversation. We hope to see you again at our Quality Days next year. Take care and see you soon.
It was a pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.